Welcome to IVF This, episode 81, EFT and Tapping with Sarah Holland. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well and that you're having a beautiful day whenever you're listening to this. Today, I am so excited to bring you this episode. Sarah Holland of The Fertile Mindset, she has a podcast called The Fertile Mindset Podcast. She has a membership program as well. She is a 20-year EFT practitioner. Now, if you're not familiar with EFT, it's the emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping. We kind of use it interchangeably through this episode, so I wanted to let you know both things that we're referring to. It's the same thing. Now, emotional freedom technique or tapping is a beautiful therapeutic mechanism that allows you to help regulate your nervous system in the process of also healing and kind of discovering new thoughts and helping you really to connect with your body. It's a beautiful therapeutic technique that also I incorporate some with some of my clients, but Sarah really is such an amazing authority figure on this topic. So I'm so excited to bring you this. She also happens to be an incredibly lovely individual. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Have a beautiful week, and I'll talk to you soon. Hello, my beautiful friends. I am talking today with Sarah Holland of the Fertile Mindset podcast, Facebook group, all amazing things. And she is here today to talk to us about her work, both as a fertility coach and as a tapping emotional freedom technique guru. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. And tell me all the things. Tell me all about you and your journey and what has led you here.
Thank you, Emily. Wow, what a great way to start. You're giving me free rein there. Really pleased to be here with you and to have a conversation with you about the area that we know is so important, the whole emotional side, the experience of fertility. So I'm really looking forward to this, first of all. So a little bit about me and where I came from to be doing this work. Well, way back, let me think, it was 1999, which feels like ancient times now. That's when I got married. And as soon as I came back from my honeymoon, I retrained as a reflexologist, the therapy that uses the feet to work on the rest of the body, and was in love with this therapy. And as soon as I qualified in the year 2000, set up my practice, I noticed I was being sent so many women and couples who were dealing with fertility problems, so many. And this was really new to me. I'd never thought about it before. I didn't know anyone who'd had IVF even, and it wasn't in my world. So I was doing a lot of research and to really understand my clients. And then through a few years of working with them with reflexology, seeing some great results, but always feeling like I was lacking on the emotional side, always feeling like I couldn't quite support them enough. So I was on the lookout for, well, what kind of support could I offer? Or refer them to really thoroughly handle the whole emotional piece of fertility, because it's overwhelming, especially when going through multiple treatment cycles. And that's what I was seeing in the women that I was supporting. So I used to refer them on to counsellors, therapists, hypnotherapists, anyone else that I thought could help, but feeling like I was kind of lacking the real skills in myself. And then I heard about this technique called EFT, which is what we're going to talk about today, I'm sure. It's also called tapping. EFT is emotional freedom techniques. It's called tapping also because it does use the meridian points on the body and your own fingertips to tap on those meridian points. And I discovered this technique, used it for myself on a fear of public speaking, which was phenomenal. A lifelong phobia that was gone in 20 minutes and now means that I can speak to anyone, anywhere. And I've even been on live TV since and just doesn't faze me now. So it showed me the power of a simple technique with what it can achieve with anxiety and fear and so on. So I then decided to train as an EFT practitioner, probably around 2003, 2004 time. Quickly started using it with all my fertility clients and seeing such amazing results, transformational results that were completely turning around their whole perspective and their whole approach to their fertility and their treatment. And for a number of years, I did the two therapies side by side, but actually my passion really was with the tapping specifically for fertility. So I sadly let the reflexology go. And for a number of years now, probably coming up 10 years now, I've been really focused on the fertility side and EFT standalone. It's all I feel I want to offer. And you called me a guru of EFT, which made me laugh.
I did.
But
I did.
I'm not going to perhaps take the name guru, but I will own that I feel like I'm perhaps one of the only people who really specializes in EFT for fertility. Quite a niche kind of modality and a specific area to support. And I think that has served me well over the years to really get to understand both all the people that I support and what they're going through in all the multiple different ways, that fertility can affect people and change their lives. And also in how we can really use this powerful technique of EFT to bring the best possible support. So, yeah, it's what I can visualize myself doing now forever is EFT and fertility.
I guess I did not realize how long you had been practicing EFT. I was right on point when I referred to you as a guru, because I have probably about a year and a half ago, Clubhouse, the social media app, was very popular. It's kind of dwindled in its popularity, but you and I would be in a lot of rooms, is how Clubhouse refers to it. But you and I would be in a lot of rooms, and there was a room that you would co-host, I think once or twice a week, and you would always end it with a tapping session. So it was almost routine that I would not be able to make it to the first part of the room, the scheduled time it started, but I damn sure made sure that I got to the second half, because I was like, oh, I know Sarah's going to do some tapping. I know Sarah's going to be there for tapping. And I do what I refer to as like recreational tapping. I don't have formal training. There is a gentleman on YouTube, last name Church, I believe.
Dawson Church, yeah.
Dawson Church, yes.
Yeah.
So I have watched a lot of his videos and I've used some of his tapping techniques. I don't have any formal training. And so when I was kind of crafting this podcast, and you and I had actually exchanged emails about maybe being guests on each other's podcasts, I really kind of went back to that moment where I was so excited to do a tapping exercise, because I was actually about to start an IVF cycle at that point. So it was really exciting that I got to be a part of it with some other people. And now just kind of hearing your story, it is remarkable that you have been this dedicated to this very, very niche population. As excited as I was to have you on the podcast before, now I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a golden opportunity. This is amazing. So 2003 was when you trained, and then about 10 years ago, so you were doing it reflexology and tapping for about 10 years. And then 10 years ago,
thinking
tapered
about
off?
it now. Yeah, it must be more than 10 years ago, because around 10 years ago-ish was when we welcomed our second child, which was through adoption. So I can kind of look at those milestones in my life, and it must be a little bit more than 10 years. But the reflexology tapered off. But before I finally said goodbye to reflexology, I spent a good few years actually training other reflexologists as well in my approach to fertility support, because I developed that massively as well in the years that I'd been doing reflexology. So I must have trained hundreds of people in the UK and Ireland. And once that had happened, I felt, right, now there's a huge body of people that are supporting everybody with enough fertility reflexology to go around. So me as one person can definitely step back and focus on, what I am really passionate about. So, because it's so important, isn't it, to have multiple modalities out there that really do understand the fertility experience. And to be honest, when I was training reflexologists, only half of the day was about techniques and what to do with the feet. The other half was actually teaching them about what it means to be a fertility patient, what it means to go through months or years of treatment, and to open their eyes to what the experience is like, because 90% of the people that came for the training had never had any personal experience of fertility issues themselves. So I think that's what is needed more than anything amongst, whether it's medical staff or therapists or friends and family, having that really understanding of what it means to be in the midst of a fertility struggle, I think is so important.
I cannot say yes enough to that, because you're absolutely right. I think that there is this, I talk a lot about how infertility isn't really discussed. We have a much more visible platform now. TikTok, Instagram, social media has provided much more visibility, but visibility doesn't equate an understanding of what it's like to go through. And a lot of that is situational. Like, it's very difficult to understand the experience of going through cancer treatment unless you have gone through cancer treatment, right? So there is that aspect of it, but there are so many things that are said to people experiencing infertility that unless you have kind of experienced that walk, having someone tell you, just relax. It might seem completely innocuous to someone who's not experiencing that. That can also be one of the most detrimental things that you can say to a woman who is experiencing infertility, or to a couple, or to an individual. So I think that's really a brilliant point about there's the technique and the skills behind what we do, but also really adding that human element of, this is what it's like to be on the other side of a phone call to say, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but. So I love that you really incorporated that in your reflexology. And I love that you maybe single-handedly trained all of Great Britain in reflexology fertility. That's amazing.
Yeah. When you put it that way.
You were like, I've got all of it. All of Western Europe over here. So tell me a little bit about how you got to fertility. You mentioned adoption. So did you experience infertility? Is that what brought you to this, or just happenstance? Tell me a little bit about that.
It was interesting because I think people assume when they see me talking about, my own story, which I do talk about publicly, and they see me supporting fertility, they think that's the reason that I'm here. And it is the reason I'm here, I would say, in the long term, because I've got this real personal experience and understanding now. However, way back when I was, newly qualified, just off my honeymoon, learning to be a therapist, and all those people came to me about fertility struggles, I actually was in a place then in my life where I didn't think I would ever have children, to be really truthful. I had a lot of kind of fears and anxieties around pregnancy and birth and being a parent, because of my own experience of how my mom gave birth to me. And I have an absent father who I've never had anything to do with. So I didn't know if I'd be a good parent if I had a father who couldn't be a good parent. I had lots of kind of beliefs around what it meant to be pregnant, give birth, or be a parent. So it wasn't a personal interest at all, but it was presented to me. I started learning. And actually, it was after my very first experience of EFT for the fear of public speaking, which was a lifelong phobia that just disappeared overnight. And I started using, it was just stunning. And I started using EFT then a lot for myself. Like, what else can I do here? This is really interesting. And I noticed that as the layers of fear and anxiety that I'd been carrying around fell away, I had this little glimmer of, actually, I think I want to be a mother. Actually, I think that is something I want. And for the first time ever in my life, literally as a child, I can remember saying I will never have children. But this came up in my kind of mid-20s by then. So I used EFT to explore that fully, decided that I did absolutely want children. I wanted them like yesterday then. I was so excited, and I was excited about giving birth. And, the whole thing was just, I was ready for it. So I came off birth control and I charted my cycles, not what people usually do, but because I was already in the world of fertility. I started charting.
Why not, right?
Yeah. And that told me that for almost the first year of trying to conceive, I didn't even ovulate. And I had very erratic cycles. So it gave me a lot of information very quickly, which is why I'm such a big fan of charting and, monitoring your cycle in a reliable way as well for that information. So yeah, I went through, in total, it was 9 years from that day of first trying to conceive to when we said, right, that's our family complete with our 2 children. And that was 9 years in total. And the first child was through, in the end, natural conception, but with a lot of natural therapies and a little bit of medical support as well and hormone treatment. And then the second child came to us through adoption.
Amazing.
I think it was good to walk those different paths, and go through the decisions about to pursue treatment or not, to go down the adoption path or not. It's until you've walked different paths, whether that is IVF or adoption or whatever it is, it's hard to imagine what it feels like to make those decisions, those huge decisions about how will I, or how do I hope to create my family and have my children.
So amazing. So what I love most about what you're describing is that it kind of highlights how versatile, that's a perfect word for EFT and tapping, how versatile it is. Because I was introduced to Dawson Church, the dude on YouTube I referred to earlier, because of someone had mentioned about weight loss and tapping. And then a fellow coach of mine, she's actually been on the podcast. She was on the podcast last year. She's a widowed mom coach. So she coaches widowed moms, and she uses EFT and tapping. And so all of a sudden, over the last 3 or 4 years, I started hearing more about tapping. And every time I hear something about tapping, it's completely different from the last thing I heard the tapping was used for, right? So it went from weight loss, and then there was smoking cessation. Then there was, grief and loss. Now you're talking about public speaking. So I want to take this moment and I want to open the floor to you to talk as much as you want about what tapping is and how, what are the benefits? What do you cover? What can it cover? You have carte blanche, you take over.
I love that, Emily. But, I know we don't have about 5 hours or so, do we? So I'll be as succinct as I can as well.
That's fair. That's fair.
Wow. So yes, EFT, it stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, which really kind of sums up in those words what it's about. And it's about helping us become free of any emotions, but not only emotions, beliefs, self-talk, thought cycles that we're stuck in, whatever it may be, that isn't beneficial for us. Now, of course, negative emotions are as natural as positive emotions, and we can't be without them. We are human beings and they are natural to have. And there are times when a perceived negative emotion can be very useful, in a stressful situation where we need to take action. We need to feel that fear to take the action that we need to, or whatever. And grief, obviously, is a very normal process to go through as well, and needs to carry out its steps and its process to have a full healing from a bereavement or a loss. So, but EFT is looking to free us of the emotions that are no longer beneficial, that are just causing us more pain, more damage, more of an obstacle than we wish it to. And I think we all are familiar with what that feels like, when we just can't seem to free ourselves, and we feel stuck with a certain way of being, and we can't imagine that we would feel any other way. And when I never imagined that I would want children. I never imagined that I'd ever invite myself to speak on the BBC News live, but I did, and all these things that are possible when you free yourself of all the beliefs and the self-talk and the old stories and the history, everything that we've collected along the way that has given us these fears and phobias and anxieties and worries and whatever. And of course, on a fertility journey, whatever that is like, if someone is facing fertility problems, treatment, it can bring back stuff from the past, but it can bring up a whole load of new stuff as well that they never thought they'd be handling. A sense of failure and a sense of loss that they don't know how to get a handle on it, because it's also new and different, and maybe they don't have any friends who are going through similar, and no one's really talking about it. So EFT as a tool for fertility support, I'm going to say this obviously because it is my life, but I think it is absolutely as near perfect as can be as a tool that is really practical, really useful, and potentially really healing and transformative as well. So what I'm going to describe in a nutshell is how EFT works, and then that will become clear as to why I think it is so useful for anything, but we're talking about fertility here as well. So EFT, the founding kind of statement of what EFT is and why it works, that was created by Gary Craig just in the mid-90s, so not that long before I first learned it, really. The statement was, any negative emotion that we experience, and when we say negative, it's one that is unwanted and not needed, any negative emotion we experience is caused by a disruption in our body's energy system. So any negative emotion we experience is caused by disruption in our body's energy system, which of course is a very different way of looking at things than, traditional psychology would or other modalities. And it doesn't mean they don't have their place. Of course they do, but this is just a very different way in, using the energy system, which is the same as used in acupuncture. We use the meridian system, which are the lines of energy that run through the body. And if anyone has had acupuncture and been to an acupuncturist's office, they'll have seen that chart on the wall with all the lines, drawn on the human body, showing where all the different points are, which is very complex. It takes, years of full-time study for an acupuncturist to learn all of that and to be able to insert the needles in the right spots. Now, EFT works in a similar way, but we use a tapping technique with your own fingertips to tap on points that are all very accessible. They're points on the head, the face, the upper body, and on the hands. So all easy points to access and tap. And these points cover all the main meridian lines in total. So what you're doing within an EFT process is you're focusing on whatever the issue is, bringing it to mind, or you might be in the moment with something as well. You may be, living in a moment of stress, and then you can use it as well at that time. But you bring the issue to mind, you feel the emotion, you say words to keep your focus there. And then you use your own fingertips to tap on those points while you're in the moment of that discomfort and that stress. And that tapping is acting to send an impulse down each of these lines to rebalance where it is, to get you back to your natural state of energetic balance. And when we get to that natural state, this is what I love about EFT, is that it just brings out whatever you most need, whatever is your natural perspective here, where your mind needs to go, what thoughts would be helpful, what emotions would be helpful. And it helps everything else just drop away. And we lose our connection to it because perhaps it was never ours anyway. My fear of childbirth was from my mother's story of how I came into the world.
Yes.
That I heard when I was 9 years old, and it scarred me. It really did scar me at the time. They were healable scars, I've now discovered. But, we pick up things, don't we? We pick up things along the way. It may have been going to a doctor's office and being given your fertility test results and being told, well, you only have a 1% chance of conceiving. So, whatever it is, whatever facts or figures or statistics or information or other people's stories, even in the media when we read about things and celebrities, and, we end up comparing ourselves, and we gather all of this and we create our own kind of narrative within it, don't we, of what we believe it means to be dealing with fertility issues and what it means for us.
Yes.
Yeah. And if we could only
so good
get some clarity on that, get clarity on all of it and think, right, what is it I need to know about myself? What do I need to research about my fertility? What feels good? What can I let go? And get a perspective and a mindset and thoughts and feelings that support us. And it is amazing to watch people emerge and actually change on camera as I'm working with them, to see how much more confident they feel and how they take back ownership of this experience, and they feel more empowered, and actually they start to live their lives more. It doesn't just become about fertility. And I had someone recently say to me, it's become a bit boring. Like, my whole life is just about fertility. And I am so much more than that. And I used to be so much more than that. And that's part of the grief as well, isn't it? It's the grief of having lost yourself along the way. And so, but it's not impossible by any means to bring it back. We just need to have the right support and the right acknowledgement of what we're experiencing. And then the tools and the techniques that appeal to us, that we can engage with and that work, which of course, big fan of EFT over here. So
yes.
In case you hadn't noticed.
Right. And that's such a great point about when you mentioned the belief system you had around pregnancy and childbirth was kind of put there by your mom, not maliciously by any stretch of the imagination, and that's something that I reiterate to my clients all the time, is the voice that's in your head that says things that is not pleasant, right? The mean girl, or I call it an asshole brain because that's sometimes just what it is. It's very rarely our own voice. Most often it is the voice of someone who didn't realize they were inflicting pain, someone who was in pain themselves and they were lashing out, culture, society, patriarchy, many different things. But I love how you kind of referred to the person you're going to hear in your head following an EFT session is actually going to be Emily or Sarah or Caitlin or whomever we're talking about, because you've finally been able to clear out some of the nonsense, some of the white noise that other people's society has fed to you. And so I think that that's a really beautiful example of just how grounding an EFT experience is, because that's how I always felt it. You know, by the time that I was introduced to EFT, I had already been coaching and had done a lot of mindset work. I tend to stay in the world of psychology and cognitive behavioral things like that. So stepping out into EFT was a big, I called it like my woo-woo transition, because it was a big step out for me, going from almost completely cerebral to more of an energy-based. I really value that kind of understanding that both of those things can work together. And in fact, when you're able to clear out the clutter, that's when we actually can work on things that I really focus on, which is like trusting yourself, understanding your inherent God-given worthiness, things like that. So I really love that you mentioned that your mom was actually, it was her story. It was her belief system around pregnancy, and you kind of adopted it in a weird way, adopted it as your own.
Yeah, it is my story. It's my story of how I came into the world. And I will never forget the moment when it hit me was when we had sex education at school. I was about 10 years old, I think, 10 years old. And we were told to go home and interview our mothers and get the story of our birth and write it down and bring it into school. And my mum, I don't know, she kind of was like, right then, let me tell you.
She rolled up her sleeves and was like, I'm going to...
I think it was cathartic for her.
Yeah, that might be the experience of my oldest child. I hope he never asked me about his birth experience, because that, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously it was fine. You know, we're both here to tell the tale, but it had its scary moments. And I won't go into all the detail of it now because nobody needs to hear that. But when I read it out, thinking back, it's so funny now. I was reading it to my teacher, who was about 25, who didn't have children yet herself. And as I read it to her, one-to-one, we were each going up individually, I saw her, all the colour drain from her face, and how very scared she now felt. So, you know, it only takes those moments, doesn't it, of hearing something, of relating to something, of thinking that that is the truth. And of course, when we're children and our brains are like sponges, you know, we take in everything that we hear as the absolute truth. So it is interesting when I work with people and they're telling me about their fears and their anxieties that they've had all their lives, or that feel like they'll never be free of it, when we go back and discover, you know, well, where did you learn this? So yeah, it's very freeing to come back to yourself. And I loved it when you said that, you know, you come back to who you are, Emily, Sarah, whoever we are, and know yourself and know what you need in that moment. And I think a lot of people like to use, and, you know, I'm a fan of them as well, but, you know, like affirmations and mantras, and it's very popular in the fertility world, isn't it, to have fertility affirmations, and certain modes of hypnotherapy and things will work with that, and work with trying to give suggestions of how you can feel instead of the way you're feeling now. Now, the trouble with that is if it doesn't really ring true to you, and it feels like such a huge leap from where you are right now. Like, you know, you've just gone through your fifth cycle of IVF and it's not working, just repeating, I am fertile. And,
yes.
You know, my body is, it's like your voice is going to be saying, well, I haven't seen any proof yet. So how can I believe that? And you're in this constant, you know, argument inside your brain. Whereas if you can clear those 5 cycles or whatever, and you can think, okay, that's done. And now I'm open to all possibilities. Let me see what seeds I can plant in this newly cleared mind of mine. It's like weeding a garden, isn't it? You know, you can kind of clear out the weeds, clear out the rubbish, fertilize that soil, and then just let the seeds drop in and see what takes root. And you will then find, and I've never met someone yet who doesn't find their own really naturally supportive way of looking at their situation. and finding the positives and finding, which route they can go down next, and making those kind of real common sense decisions, those really realistic choices, which for me was how my transition from trying for a baby to moving to adoption was pretty seamless and smooth. Whereas I know that's a big transition, but we did it in such a way that just felt right for us. And we could, when the adoption social worker was interviewing us and saying, but, Mr. and Mrs. Holland, you haven't been through years of IVF, and I've never met anybody who went straight from trying naturally to adopting. Like, why did you not do IVF? And we had to tell our story and justify it, but because we did that in a way that felt right for us, it made perfect sense us telling the story. It's like, well, this is why we chose the paths we chose, and we felt comfortable with it. And she was our social worker for our adoption, used to be an IVF counsellor, a fertility counsellor. And she said, yeah, I can completely understand your thought processes. And that's really good to hear that you did that in the right way for you. Everyone makes their choices. That's something I'm kind of a big advocate for. Women, people, couples choosing their own paths and not feeling they have to go along some kind of conveyor belt of, this is what happens when you can't have children naturally. This is what you must do. I think it's very important that we all choose the path that's right for us.
1,000,000 times yes for literally everything you just said. Number one, I also have a love-hate relationship with affirmations. I think they're beautiful when we believe them, but if we don't believe them, then they're just words on a page. But your last point about choosing your path, I think so many of us, and I know for certain me, during the bulk of our infertility journey was very much like, I have to do this. And it felt so incredibly disempowering, because it was like I didn't get to choose. There was no part of this that I got to choose. But when I looked back, everything was based on my choice. I think we get into this very black and white thinking, where if it's not this, then it has to be that. And we lose our autonomy, we lose our empowerment, we lose so much of ourselves in that process, when it has to be either this way or that. So if I can't get pregnant naturally, then I have to go through this. And that's not the case. I talk a lot about like consequences. What is a consequence of a decision you're willing to accept? And what's a consequence of a decision you're not willing to accept? And for you, it might be, I am willing to accept, not like, but willing to accept the road of IVF because I'm not willing to accept an alternative of continuing in this pattern, right? So I love what you talked about, but I know we're kind of getting a little bit tight on time, so I want to make sure that we cover what types of things, inside of fertility, outside of fertility, what types of things can EFT help with?
Okay, I'm going to primarily focus on fertility, I think, but you will see where it goes. So first of all, I would say the primary thing that I work on with people at an initial session is often overwhelm. So overwhelm is just such an enemy to taking, the right action and knowing yourself and so on, So dealing with overwhelm and all the information you have in your head about fertility options and treatments and what everyone else says you should do, clearing that overwhelm can be really, really useful. I will often walk people through the whole thought about, well, look at this journey. Think about what it will be like to get your pregnancy test result. How will that feel? How will it feel to be 9 months pregnant? Does that feel possible, or does that bring up some fears and worries? And then giving birth, and then being a new parent and a parent then for the rest of your life. And how does all of that feel? And it can be surprising to them often that there are some areas that they feel very anxious about or worried about, or just very blocked, and they can't even think about it because it doesn't feel like it's ever possible. So that's an interesting way to really feel like you're fully aligned with this path you're on. It's not that anyone who comes to me doesn't want to have a baby, although some people do come when they're in two minds, and that's part of the process. But most people are, I definitely want to get pregnant. I'm on this path. And then when they start to work on the actual reality of it and thinking about it with EFT and visualizing those different steps, it can really clear the way so that they feel more focused and more definite than ever before. And then it's quite interesting to see the extra resources that come in, the inner resources as well, and how smoother that journey can go once they really, feel that they've cleared the way and they're happy to be on that path. And others will come to me when they're at the decision-making process of, which clinic do I go to? Which treatment do I go ahead with? Should I continue using my own eggs, or should I move to donor like my doctor's suggesting? And which donor shall I choose? There are so many decisions, aren't there, along the way with any fertility journey? So many decisions. So clear thinking, again, is the friend to making good decisions. And others will come asking for support specifically for preparation for treatment for IVF. There might be some points that they're very worried about. Often it's injecting themselves for the first time or taking the medication and worry about side effects. When they're thinking about donor IVF, what do I tell my children? What do I tell my family? Am I really ready to do this? Will I feel a bond with that child? There's so many questions and worries that come up. So yeah, there's a lot that can be dealt with, anything that is triggered emotionally. And of course, in the process of it all, you've got well-meaning, but often tactless and interfering comments from friends and family, and just having a way to manage that and not be kind of knocked off balance every time someone says something insensitive, that you can know yourself and you can know that they're perhaps well-meaning and you just don't need that advice right now, and you can let it bounce off the surface of your protective bubble that you might visualize around yourself, multiple ways. And then, of course, all the different ways that you talked about there, the experiences you'd had with weight loss and other things and fears and phobias. And I would say that almost everybody who comes to me for one-to-one support for fertility, primarily, we deal with other stuff as well. Because, fertility has a knock-on impact to other areas of your life, like friendships, relationship, work, finances, health. It has a massive knock-on impact to those areas. And also those areas of life and other stuff that's going on in life has an impact on fertility too. And sometimes something is just so important that needs to be addressed first. When we were going through the pandemic, in my membership group, the Fertile Mindset Sanctuary, we do weekly tapping videos on whatever is requested. And usually it is fertility related stuff. But when the pandemic started, it started to be much more about that, about the uncertainty in the world and working as a frontline worker and, worry about catching the virus and should I have a vaccine and, all the different things that came up. So I think that's important as well, is that we see ourselves as all the different facets and all the different things that we need. And it's not just that one part of fertility, to take care of all of our well-being. And luckily, like you said, you didn't call it flexible, you called it something else, EFT, that
versatile.
kind of versatile, that's it. And yeah, you can use it on absolutely anything and everything that has that emotional context to it. And you will find that freedom, that other way of being. And when you just talked earlier about saying, you think if it doesn't work this way, you have to use that other option. And it's like an either or. I have a coach friend, and she will always talk about the secret third option. There's always that secret third option that you're not seeing, because it's not the way that other people do things, or it's not the way you thought things would go. And the tapping, because it frees up our thinking and clears our mind, it can really start to uncover those other ways of doing things. It's like, oh, wow, I can be creative here and I can think of a different path that I wasn't thinking of before, even just for the small decisions as well as the big ones.
Oh, I love that so much. The secret third option. Yeah. I talk about the spin cycle, how we just kind of get caught in a spin cycle. And so then all we can see are the 2 points of reference that we have is this option or this option. And so a lot of my work is around how do we stop the spin cycle so that we can see, in your friend's words, the secret third option. Or, because we're incredible beings, humans have incredible brains, we might even have secret fourth and fifth options.
Exactly. Yeah.
we have untapped potential that we just need to clear out the nonsense that our brain produces, and then we can get on with actually solving our problems. So that's so fun. Sarah, I had initially wanted to have you guide us through an actual tapping technique, but you brought up a beautiful point that there are very specific areas that you want to tap, and so it can be very difficult on an audio platform. So you had mentioned, do you have any free resources or a video that my listeners can access? How would they do that?
Yes, I do, Emily. Thank you. Yes. You're right. The easiest way to learn EFT, as you mentioned about seeing, YouTube videos and so on, is to see it visually, to see the points and to see the steps and the process. which would take way too long to explain here in audio only, and probably it'd be very confusing. So what I have a whole bunch of free resources, including videos, in my free Facebook group, and it's called the Fertile Mindset Cafe. And in that group, we have the guides section, and under the guides, all the resources are there listed. So there is an ebook with a picture of all the charts. There are videos there. There are also tapping scripts as well for kind of typical 5 different areas of fertility challenges that many people come up against. And they will show you all the points to tap on and the kind of ideas for words to say as well. So it's a very, very usable bunch of resources there. And it's everything that you need really to get started. You know, it is a simple technique to learn, just to learn where the points are and what the step-by-step process is of applying it. And then the more complex bit is, if you like, is the art of applying it and how to really focus on what is important and how to use EFT effectively enough to get the results that you want. But to start, you know, really easy with these resources is a really great place to start. And you'll quickly notice, you know, how EFT works for you, and you can go from there. The sky's the limit.
That's incredibly generous. So the Fertile Mindset Cafe.
That's right. The Fertile Mindset Cafe.
Okay.
It's a private Facebook group. So you'll be able to request to join. You'll be able to search, request to join and find it. There is a question there just to check that everyone who joins is on a fertility journey and isn't there, you know, for any other reason. I did have someone once join because they were looking for lawn fertilizers or something, and it was fertile came up, and they were like, I work with garden fertilizers. It's like, no, that's not us. You need to find a different
close,
group.
But
so not quite,
so
is it? So yeah, everyone is vetted as they come in, and it will only be the other members and me that can see that you're in the group and can see anything that you choose to post, if you choose to post anything. So it is a very safe and private space there.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, if someone is like, I have to work with Sarah, because they would be brilliant to do so, how do we work with you? How do we find you? And then also talk a little bit about your podcast.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah. So you can find out all about me on my website at fertilemindset.com, and everything. I am Fertile Mindset wherever you find me, really. So that's on Facebook. It's Fertile Mindset is my page. On Instagram, it's fertile_mindset. So slightly different. And my podcast, as you said, is the Fertile Mindset podcast, which I'm really excited to invite you on soon as well. We're going to have a lovely chat then. So that's wonderful. Looking forward to that. And ways people can work with me. One-to-one is an option. I'm on my summer break at the moment, but from September onwards, I will have one-to-one spaces coming available as they come up. And they can get in touch with me at mail@fertilemindset.com. But the easiest, the most affordable, and also a really, really lovely way to work with me is through my membership, which is called the Fertile Mindset Sanctuary. And that is open all the time. So you can join during the summer or later if you're listening to the podcast later. And that is just £29 a month. And it really engages you with lots of tapping support. We have twice monthly support groups. We have weekly Facebook Lives where we do tapping videos. And there's a huge library of resources. I think we've got almost 230 10-minute tapping videos now for every single aspect you can think of for fertility, as well as like courses that you can work through and about discovering any potential emotional blocks to conceiving, and all kinds of stuff is in there. It's a really, really lovely place. And a big part of that is the community, the other members that are there and how they support each other is just so beautiful, because they're all on a similar journey in a way, because they're all looking to have their babies and create their family in very different ways. But the thing that they have in common is how they're prioritizing themselves and their well-being as well.
Yes.
Which brings us back, to where we started, really, how it is really important to do that. And it is about having the baby, and it is about, achieving that. But when we start to look at self-care and support, it's about us as well, and our well-being, and even if we want to do that for our future children, to make sure that we are healthy and whole and resilient and strong, ready to meet our children in the future. But yeah, it's lovely to see these women coming together and supporting each other with that common goal.
Oh, I love that so much. So kind of the entryway to get exposure to you is the Fertile Mindset podcast and the Fertile Mindset Cafe free Facebook group. And then all of that would lead into the Fertile Mindset Sanctuary if someone wanted to experience a little bit more high touch tapping techniques and things like that.
Yeah, and it's about bringing it into your life as like an everyday easy habit as well. You know, we just completed a 22-day tapping challenge in the sanctuary, which was lovely because
nice.
we came together every day for 22 days and tapped together. And those videos are still there. So some said, well, what I'm doing is going back and I'm starting day one again, and I'm going to do 22 days on a roll and always have that self-care in my life. You know, 10 minutes a day. What a wonderful gift to give yourself.
Oh, I love that so much. Sarah, I cannot thank you enough for being on here and talking about this beautiful, amazing, versatile, that's our word, technique. And just thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope you guys check out her podcast again, Fertile Mindset Podcast. The Fertile Mindset Cafe is her free Facebook group. All of the things. Sarah is just such a lovely individual and an incredible practitioner of this technique. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being here.
Oh, thank you, Emily. It's been a real pleasure to talk. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.